Namaskar. This is Deeksha Sharma and I'm here to talk to you about yoga as the way out from the age-old dilemma of to be or not to be. At the very outset, I would like to begin by thanking Professor Alok Kumar Rai, the Honorable Vice Chancellor of the University of Lucknow, for initiating this platform through which people like me can connect with their alma mater. I would also like to thank Professor R.P. Singh for entrusting me with this responsibility of speaking through this platform. I would like to thank my PhD supervisor, Professor V.P. Singh, for believing in my idea of research on yogic tradition and literature. I would like to thank Professor Nishi Pandey, for she has been a fountain of inspiration for me and many like me. I would like to thank Mr. Vivek Sharma, the founder of Krishna Tarangam, an organization which I am an integral part of, and my practices at Krishna Tarangam, my spiritual practices at Krishna Tarangam have shaped the way I look at yoga. I also thank the author, Mr. Vivek Sharma, of this book, The Seed of Bhagavad Gita, for this has again brought to light very many buried Indian concepts that are still relevant. Let us now begin. Let us head into what is yoga first. Like any other subject, there are many ways of looking at yoga. It's a mosaic of, I would say, perspectives. But like any other topic, we need to understand that yoga is not just those perspectives, but a totality of it, and even more than that. The term, etymologically speaking, the term yoga comes from the Sanskrit root word called yuj, meaning to bind, to unite. Scholars have often said that the purpose of yoga is this unity, this uniting between the consciousness within the body and the supra-consciousness. Basically, the realization of the fact that we are an infinite continuity. We've looked at that as being the ultimate aim of yoga. But when we look at the Patanjali Yoga Sutras, which seem to be the first compilation on yoga directly, it begins by saying that the purpose of yoga is to stop the cessations, the incessant cessations of the mind which run in circles. Yoga Chitta Vritti Nirodha is the aim of yoga. So that is one perspective. Another perspective, and a more modern one and a scientific one, is to look at it as a discipline, as a practice that just makes one evolve mentally, physically, emotionally, or even physiologically. So some people look at yoga as just a discipline. Now, is it a practice? Is it the end? Is it the means to an end? What is it really? Because for people, there's been this confusion around the term yoga for a very long time. Is the ultimate aim of the union between this consciousness and the supra-consciousness yoga, or the practice that leads to yoga is yoga? I would say both. I would say yoga is both a means and end, to use an economic terminology. Both the aim and the means, basically. So that is my understanding of yoga. But let us go a step further. People have looked at yoga as a knowledge system, as philosophy. When you look at yoga as philosophy, it becomes an object of intellectual cogitation. And I'm not saying it's wrong. It's not. It's important for any person who wants to walk on this path to first understand what is it. And I think it's impossible without intellectual cogitation. So that's the first thing. But it is not the end of it. So to say that yoga is a philosophy is to limit it to only one aspect of human existence, and that is to its intellectual aspect. Yoga is more than a philosophy. It is an experience. And so, at the very beginning, I'm saying that the starting point of yoga is subjective in nature. When I say subjective, I mean that it begins with this being that is me, that is you, that is I. So that is how yoga begins. And so for everybody, I believe today, yoga is different. They mean different things to different people. Nonetheless, the ultimate aim remains the same. Now, it's sad though that our education system has not even looked at this practical aspect of training the mind-body complex, which I guess is completely left out in today's curriculum. When we talk of yoga, we just talk of asanas, we just talk of a bit of pranayam, but it's not just that, it's much more than that, and I'll just talk about it. Like any other practice, much like our learning of the language English, our learning of the language Hindi, or our learning of maths, physics, or any other subject, it also needs a lot of practice. But the sad thing, like I've already mentioned, is that we're not taught this from the very beginning, from a very young age, and so it becomes really difficult for us to imbibe it in our daily practices, because it has lagged in our daily schedule for a very long time, for almost 12 years that we were studying. So I believe that yoga should be an integral part of the curriculum, not even co-curriculum, because it's not co-curriculum. Today, what we see when we see at world, we see that all the problems, I mean majority of problems, arise due to the mental realm, arise due to our misunderstanding or non-understanding of our mental existence. So I'll come to that. And by mental, I don't just mean psychological. Yoga recognizes 10 such parts of human beings, or what you can say, sheets of human existence. And now, under Prakriti, it has obviously borrowed that, like scholars say, and most of the philosophers say, from the Sankhya system of knowledge. But I'm not going to talk about all those 10, because that needs another lecture, and it needs to be discussed in quite a detail. And then there are many, I would say, counter questions that need to be answered. Let's think of our own existence as having 4 sheets. Why am I saying 4? Because that's how it's been said in the Bhagavad Gita, right? I think in the 3rd chapter, where we recognize that there is the body, there are the senses, then there is the mind, then or mana, and then there is buddhi, and then there is the 5th element or the 5th dimension, which is the ultimate, which is the divine, which we don't talk about a lot, because to bind the divine in language is almost an impossibility. So I'm not going to talk about that. I'm going to talk about these 4, and that's why I say these 4 sheets of existence. First, your body. We're all quite aware of our body. I don't think we need any more awareness of our bodies. The senses, I won't say completely aware of it, but yes, at the level of understanding our perception, we are aware of our eyes, our nose, and we are aware of our senses too. And then the mind. We are aware that there is a mind, that there is a mental realm to our existence, but we cease to understand that we as the selves are the real guiders of this mind, and that this mind, whatever we look at it as, is mostly something that's enslaving us. So it becomes a horrendous reality. It becomes something that enslaves us. That I think most of the modern youth and the problems of the modern youth are somehow related to this mental realm of not being able to get out of this slavery of the mind. Now, when I say slavery, I just mean that we do understand, we are aware that every time we're thinking, something's going on in the mind. We are aware that every day when we get up with a thought, we get up with a mind, we get up with so many ideas in our minds, and they keep on going endlessly, almost like a motion picture, right? Almost like a movie. And most of the times our reality or our realities are constructed out of our understanding of things in our mind. Now, people call this solipsism, but I'm not saying it's a complete reality, but it is to a certain extent a majority of our reality. If somebody says something to us, we interpret it in a particular manner because there's something already going on in the mind, and it's in the light of what is going on in the mind that we interpret whatever is happening to us from outside. And so I think that the urgent need for the youth and for anybody who wants to evolve is to first tackle the mind and then the intellect. But the sad part is the mind has been left behind by the curriculum today, and we've jumped straight to the intellect, thinking that the logical, analytic aspect of intellect is all that there is to intellectuality, which is in fact a very, I would say, parochial viewpoint of the intellect. And that is the reason why we seem to be stuck all the time within our own minds and trapped by it. Not understand, we do not recognize that we are the owners of it, that we are actually causing everything that's going on in the mind. I know when I say this, I take on a lot of responsibility. The self takes on a lot of responsibility of whatever is going on in the mind. And so most of us would like to escape that responsibility and the burden that comes with that responsibility of accepting one's own mental processes as being created by one's own self. And that's the reason why, to kind of ditch this whole process of let's say, bearing the brunt of the responsibility of everything that's going on around us, that we escape from the mental realm. But sadly, we never really do escape. Now, let me explain it this way. Most of the times, and bringing into context now what I was intending to say from the very beginning, the question of the situation of to be or not to be. Often we say this is the modern dilemma. The thinking mind today is unable to decide to be or not to be, right? But sadly, as though it comes to you, I mean, it's no revelation that even in not deciding, we are deciding not to be. So let me put it this way. Let me, maybe even paint a picture in front of you through this small anecdote. Think of yourself walking on the path to your favorite place. Let's say Paradise Island. Obviously, cancelling out all the notions of paradise in your mind, obviously. Just the paradise that you have envisioned for yourself. And you're walking, and you find these two small stones in your way. Well, they're no hurdle. You pick them up, you throw them away, right? And one of them was to be, the other was not to be. You don't realize their importance. You say, what's this? It's just so small. It doesn't really stop anything on my way. You go ahead, and you encounter many such small stones of to be or not to be. And you keep shoving them back. And you keep, thinking that it's not going to stop you from being on the way to being on the way of your goal. Unless you realize there is a big wall between you and the goal, and that was created by you. Every time that you shoved that not to be and to be behind you, you were choosing not to be. Although every time that you were walking towards it, you were choosing to be. But this was more than your walking towards the goal. And so your non-realization of the goal might be because of the fact that you actually chose not to realize the goal 100 times before walking 99 steps towards your goal. So what I'm trying to say here, and this is exactly what is karma. Little do we realize that every thought in our mind, and this is also that I really owe to this book, creates a neuron in your mind, in your brain specifically. Every small intent is a neuron in your brain, and the more you nurture a particular intent, consciously or unconsciously, you are paving a path for yourself. Little do you realize that every time you throw the stone of not to be behind you, you are activating the neuron of not being on the path of your goal, thinking that you are easily, just neglecting choosing. But you've unconsciously already chosen. You've chosen not to be. And then the responsibility of what you would call its fruition of not attaining the aim. And after having understood that every small thought, every small intention, every act of negation that you are, of postponing the action, you are always choosing. Here I contradict Derrida. And I think Derrida himself understood this when he said that, the existence in a state of constant aporia. There is no such existence in a state of constant aporia. Because if it were so, then his concept of deconstruction would have lived without the concept of creation of another center. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that every time you choose not to choose, you're choosing not to be. Which means that there is no moment in life without a choice and its repercussions. You do it consciously or you do it unconsciously. Repercussions are bound to follow. So the whole point of yoga is to make the unconscious conscious, is to make the life process as a conscious one, so that whatever you choose, you're responsible for it. But not everybody walks on this path, because the burden of bearing the responsibility is something that everybody wants to escape. But if I tell you that you're never really escaping this burden, in fact, it's going to come around back to you, then you would, I guess, better choose something. And that's where I think the problem of to be or not to be dissolves, because there is no not being. Even in not being, you're choosing being not to be. So being is the reality of it. It kind of gets cancelled out not to be. All I mean to say is that your reality is your creation. Please construct it wisely. And through yoga, there is a wise way out.